The airport was buzzing under the fluorescent lights, time-ticking announcements echoing and crowds surging toward distant gates. Amid the daily chaos, something began brewing at a quiet corner of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. A sharp-eyed TSA officer fixated on one passenger, a poised black woman, heading to a high-stakes business meeting. One glance from him, laden with suspicion, ignited a chain of events that would unravel both their lives. Little did he know his next encounter with this very traveler would flip his world upside down, and by the next morning, a shocking piece of news on her company's job board would spell his reckoning. Gabrielle Thompson always believed in arriving early for flights. Her mother had instilled that discipline long ago. Her travel routine was as polished as the suit she wore. Hair meticulously styled in a bun, a rolling suitcase in one hand, and her phone in the other, reviewing last-minute details for her upcoming presentation in Atlanta. She was a regional director of a rising tech consulting firm called GlobeLink Solutions. This morning, she was due at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport on a connecting flight from Chicago's O'Hare. The final destination, a game-changing pitch to potential investors. Even the bustling environment of the airport had become second nature to her lines, checks the hum of planes and the swirl of fellow passengers. She had done this trip a dozen times that year alone, but this one carried a special significance. If her pitch to Secure.com, a major cybersecurity provider headquartered in Atlanta, went well, it could seal the next wave of contracts for GlobeLink Solutions. That would mean expansions, new hires, and a shot at being recognized among the top tech consultancies nationwide. Everything seemed straightforward, yet a subtle tension gnawed at her. She'd woken from a restless sleep, her thoughts churning about her boss's cryptic email the evening before. Don't be late. Secure.com might be looking for more than just a vendor. It was uncharacteristically vague. Could it mean Secure.com wanted a partnership, or maybe a merger? She didn't know. Still, optimism mingled with nerves as she made her way through the swirling crowd inside O'Hare. The early morning flight from Chicago to Atlanta would take just under 2 hours, enough time for Gabrielle to polish her slides. Her laptop was loaded with charts, her analysis bulletproof. Anticipation fluttered in her stomach. Exiting the taxi curbside, she thanked the driver with a polite smile and, gripping her suitcase handle firmly, walked briskly to the Delta Airlines check-in counter. Checking in was a breeze. Her seat 12D was already assigned. With her mobile boarding pass glowing on her phone, she joined the security line. As Gabrielle navigated the labyrinth of ropes that guided travelers, she couldn't help but notice the usual chaos business travelers, frantically scanning their phones, families wrangling excited children, retirees shuffling with well-earned leisure. She caught a glimpse of a teenage girl grinning ear to ear as she clutched her brand-new passport, perhaps her first international trip. A comforting routine, she thought, waiting her turn to place her belongings in the grey TSA bins. Shoes off, laptop out, separate bin for liquids. She always did everything by the book. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Double-check the rules, baby. No mistakes, no trouble. Despite her disciplined approach, Gabrielle sensed a faint unease. Something about the officer at the X-ray monitor seemed off. He'd been glancing at her, not in a casual just-doing-my-job way, but with a pointed, hawkish stare that made her skin prickle. She forced a tight-lipped smile, hoping it was nothing. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. Edgar Eddie Burns didn't start his day craving conflict. In fact, the TSA officer prided himself on being a model employee. He arrived at work early, took his station at the security line, and routinely performed his checks with mechanical efficiency. Some days blurred into a monotony of scanning IDs, waving travelers forward, and occasionally pulling aside suspicious items. Keep the lines moving. Keep travelers safe, he reminded himself. Yet beneath his professional veneer, Eddie fought a personal battle with prejudice he barely recognized in himself. Weeks earlier, a supervisor had told him, "Eddie, your numbers are good, but you've got to watch your biases. You can't single out people just because they look different." He'd nodded, though resentment simmered. It wasn't his fault. Certain travelers gave him an uneasy gut feeling, was it? He was just doing his job right. Standing behind the X-ray monitor that morning, Eddie scanned the crowd. He noticed the usual suspects, tired moms, frantic businessmen, a smattering of tourists. Then came Gabrielle Thompson, stepping up to the table. Eddie's eyes zoned in on her tailored navy blazer, her crisp white blouse, and the calm, self-assured aura she projected. Something about her triggered a reflex in him. He didn't realize it then, but he was feeding into a subtle, deep-seated bias. He told himself, "She's too poised, too calm. Why is she so collected? What's she hiding?" In truth, Gabrielle was simply efficient. She knew exactly how to breeze through TSA lines without fuss. He watched her remove her laptop, place it in a bin, slip off her shoes, and carefully deposit them in another. She had a small toiletry bag neatly abiding by the 3.4-ounce rule. There was nothing outwardly amiss. "Relax," he told himself, but his suspicion flared again when he saw her phone, a top-of-the-line model, slightly scratched at the edges. Did she buy it from a shady source, or maybe she's messing with me? These thoughts were irrational, but prejudice seldom plays by rational rules. When it was Gabrielle's turn to pass, Eddie flagged her bin. "Ma'am, step aside, please," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Gabrielle looked puzzled, but complied. Then he rummaged through her toiletry bag, systematically checking each item. Hand sanitizer, moisturizer, travel perfume. He inspected the packaging as if they were contraband. He asked, "Do you have any other electronics with you, ma'am?" Gabrielle's heart thudded at the pointed question. She'd endured random checks before, but the way he stared made her uneasy. The slow, deliberate way he scanned her face was impossible to ignore. She did her best to remain poised. "No, sir. Only what you see." He frowned, then nodded. "All right. Move along." By now, other passengers were craning to watch the encounter. Gabrielle gathered her belongings, feeling an unwelcome flush of embarrassment. A part of her wanted to dismiss it as routine security procedure, yet the suspicion that had flickered in Eddie's eyes felt intensely personal, like a condemnation. She walked away unsettled and irritated. In his mind, Eddie shrugged, just being cautious. But he had no idea the domino he had just tipped, or that by the next morning Gabrielle Thompson would appear in his life again in a way he could never have imagined. Gabrielle made her way toward Gate B15, an area bustling with business travelers. She tried to compose herself, pushing aside the lingering discomfort from the TSA screening. She settled into a seat near the window, checking her phone for emails. A new message from her boss, Elizabeth Crane, popped up. "There's a rumor. Secure Comms CEO will be present. Bring your A-game." Gabrielle's nerves spiked. It wasn't just the head of IT or a mid-level manager. It was the top executive, possibly the entire board. That raised the stakes significantly. Eager to distract herself, she glanced around for a coffee kiosk. She spotted a small Starbucks at the far end of the concourse, but a quick mental calculation told her she'd have a better chance waiting for the beverage service on the flight than standing in the serpentine line. Her thoughts drifted back to Eddie Burns. Why had he singled her out? Had she done something that triggered suspicion? She mentally retraced her steps. She had complied with every protocol. Something about his gaze had made her feel exposed, as though he'd already deemed her guilty of something. Shake it off, Gabby, she told herself. Focus on the meeting. The gate agent announced boarding, and Gabrielle stood in line for her Group 1 access. The plane was on schedule, which was a blessing. She settled into seat 12D, stowing her carry-on beneath the seat in front of her. The flight was nearly full. A father traveling with 2 young kids fumbled across the aisle, the kids chattering excitedly about a trip to Disney World. Beyond them, a college student scrolled anxiously through text messages, biting her lip. Gabrielle smiled to herself. Despite the tension with the TSA officer, she still found a curious comfort in the hum of an airplane preparing for takeoff. However, her reprieve was short-lived. 10 minutes before departure, the pilot's voice crackled over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a minor mechanical issue we need to address before takeoff. We expect a short delay. Thank you for your patience. A collective groan rippled through the cabin. Gabrielle's chest tightened. She had a tight schedule and wanted to arrive in Atlanta with enough time to freshen up before the big pitch. She tried to focus on her presentation slides. Opening her laptop, she reviewed financials, synergy proposals, and risk assessments. But her mind wandered. That lingering feeling from security check refused to fully leave her. Was it just a random encounter with a paranoid TSA agent? Or was it something bigger? Sighing, she jotted down a few notes to refine her pitch. Glancing out the plane's window, she saw the sun emerging from behind a low cloud cover. The light felt promising, like a sign that no matter the rocky start, things would turn around. After 30 minutes, another announcement. We've sorted the issue, folks. Flight attendants prepare for takeoff. Relief mingled with rising adrenaline. Gabrielle stowed her laptop, fastened her seatbelt, and exhaled slowly. She had no clue that the storm brewing around her would soon make a mechanical delay seem trivial by comparison. Eddie Burns rarely thought about the subtle biases that fueled his suspicions. Growing up in a tight-knit suburb of Cincinnati, his father had served in the military and instilled in him a certain worldview. Be vigilant, be suspicious of people who don't look like you, and never let your guard down. Over time, Eddie learned to hide these convictions behind a mask of just doing my job. He disliked introspection, preferring the black-and-white rules of airport security. That morning, after Gabrielle passed through, Eddie remained agitated. Something about the calm confidence in her eyes gnawed at him. He'd once been told that certain passengers present themselves too perfectly, suggesting they might be hiding something. That notion had stuck with him. As the lines thinned, his colleague Manny approached. "You okay, man?" Manny asked. "You look stressed." Eddie shrugged. "Just keeping watch. Saw a lady who set off my gut feeling." Manny frowned. "We got to be mindful. Remember the training. Gut feelings can mislead you. Could be profiling." Eddie bristled at the suggestion. "Nah, it's not like that." But he couldn't muster a better defense. By noon, his shift ended, and he clocked out, still rattled by the morning's exchange. On his way to the staff parking lot, he replayed the encounter in his head. Gabrielle's unwavering gaze, her professional demeanor. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. She fit the profile he rationalized, though he'd be hard-pressed to explain precisely which profile that might be. In a hurry to beat the midday traffic, Eddie got into his car. Outside, planes roared overhead, reminding him of the ephemeral nature of his job. Thousands of passengers passing by each day, each with a story he'd never know. He tossed his ID badge on the passenger seat, that subtle voice in the back of his mind pestering him. Was I too harsh? But introspection gave way to annoyance. She looked suspicious, he muttered to no one. I was just doing my job. Unbeknownst to him, Gabrielle's day was unfolding differently. She landed in Atlanta and hurried to her hotel room, ignoring the pang of hunger in her stomach. Time was scarce. The minor delay had eaten into her prep window. She had just enough time to change into a fresh outfit, crisp pastel blouse, charcoal pencil skirt, modest heels, and rush to Securcom's downtown headquarters. She had no time to dwell on Eddie or the TSA fiasco. Bigger stakes awaited. Some undercurrent of the morning's tension, however, still dogged her steps. It was an unshakable sense of being judged and singled out. Gabrielle was used to it. As a black woman climbing the corporate ladder, she had encountered subtle forms of discrimination before side-eyed glances in boardrooms, assumptions about her abilities. Still, it stung every time. She resolved to channel that frustration into her presentation. "Show them what you're made of," she told herself, tightening her grip on her briefcase as she hailed a cab. Across the city, in a modest apartment, Eddie tried to forget Gabrielle's face. He had no idea the cosmic twist fate had in store for him, or that his job, his pride, would soon hang in the balance because of a single, seemingly routine security check. Meanwhile, airport security operations continued as usual at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The TSA managers supervised rotating shifts of officers, scanning for potential threats and occasionally doing spot checks on employees. The day's hustle and bustle rarely left room for deeper reflection about individual passenger experiences. The goal was plain: keep lines moving, keep travelers safe. But in a glass-walled corner office, perched above the main security screening area, TSA Supervisor Monique Silva surveyed her team. She had been receiving sporadic complaints about Eddie Burns for months, nothing too concrete, but enough to raise concerns. He tended to rely too heavily on subjective gut checks, and though he hadn't blatantly violated protocol rumors, swirled that he singled out passengers of color more frequently than others. That morning she'd caught a glimpse of Eddie's tense posture when Gabrielle passed through. She didn't intervene at the time, she rarely did, unless something was evidently out of line. But the interaction stuck in her mind. She made a mental note to review the footage later, just to ensure no rules had been broken. By mid-afternoon, Monique was scrolling through incident reports when she noticed a pattern. Most travelers who lodged informal complaints about Eddie's manner said the same thing. He asked odd questions, rummaged through belongings longer than necessary, and sometimes seemed to have a personal agenda. Monique knew the importance of unbiased security. If the TSA started losing the public's trust, it could create bigger issues for everyone. At the same time, an email from a higher-up reminded all supervisors about the upcoming audit. The Department of Homeland Security occasionally did random checks on TSA personnel, focusing on compliance with non-discrimination policies. The date was just a week away. Monique felt the tension build. She wanted her team to pass with flying colors, but Eddie had become a wild card. That same afternoon, Manny approached Monique with a worried expression. "Hey Monique, you got a second?" "Sure," she said, gesturing to a seat. He hesitated. "I don't want to throw Eddie under the bus, but I think he's misinterpreting the guidelines sometimes. He's pulling people aside just 'cause he gets a gut feeling." Monique rubbed her temples. "I've heard. You think he'll be a liability?" Manny nodded. "Potentially. I've talked to him, but he's defensive. Says he's only doing what we're trained to do." Monique sighed. "We can't afford a discrimination complaint, especially now. I'll keep an eye on him." She scribbled a note to herself. Monitor Eddie. Address potential bias issues. That same note would become crucial in the days to come, especially after a chain of events tied to one passenger, Gabrielle Thompson, spiraled out of control. A single complaint from the right or wrong person could set an entire career on fire. Monique recognized the risk. What she didn't anticipate was just how quickly and dramatically it would all unfold. While Eddie was wrestling with his conscience back in Chicago, and Monique was busy examining protocol in Atlanta, Gabrielle was 30,000 feet in the air, heading from Chicago to her connecting flight with a short layover. She sipped a ginger ale, eyes darting between her laptop and the overhead screen that displayed their flight path. The hum of the jet engines provided a steady background rhythm to her racing thoughts. A man across the aisle coughed persistently, prompting the flight attendant to bring him water. Gabrielle was momentarily reminded of how fragile everything felt in these pressurized tubes. With her presentation slides open, she kept revising small details, fonts, colors, the bullet points, summarizing GlobeLink Solutions' unique selling propositions. She recalled the cryptic hint from her boss, Elizabeth Crane. They might want more than just a vendor. The possibilities buzzed in her mind. Could SecureCom be looking for strategic partnerships, equity stakes, or an acquisition? In an attempt to quell her overthinking, she reminded herself of her achievements so far. She'd won major accounts in her previous roles, consistently outperformed her quarterly targets, and spearheaded diversity and inclusion initiatives that gave her firm a progressive edge in the industry. This pitch was more than business for Gabrielle. It was personal validation. She wanted to show that a black woman in a predominantly white tech sphere could command the boardroom just as capably, if not more so, than anyone else. Her stomach twisted again, recalling that TSA officer's glare. She tried to laugh it off as a minor inconvenience, a momentary brush with bias. But no matter how small the incident seemed, such experiences had a cumulative effect. They gnawed at one's sense of belonging. You can't let that define your day, she told herself. Focus on the opportunity. The seatbelt sign dinged. The plane shuddered briefly in some minor turbulence. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, with a calm reassurance that they'd encountered a small patch of unstable air. Gabrielle tried to interpret it as a metaphor for her current situation. Brief turbulence before a smoother path. She packed away her laptop as the attendants passed through to collect trash. Peering out the window, she spotted the sprawl of Atlanta's metropolitan area coming into view. Soon they'd be descending toward Hartsfield-Jackson, one of the busiest airports in the world. As the plane banked, Gabrielle got a glimpse of the skyline's tall buildings, shimmering in the midday sun. Her heartbeat quickened. This is it, she thought. Within the next 2 hours, she'd be in SecureCom's conference room, presenting the culmination of months of market analysis and a robust proposal that could redefine her career. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. She needed confidence, focus, and calm. Little did she realize that her path would cross again with the very man who'd singled her out in the security line, and that the next time they met, the roles would be reversed in a way neither could have anticipated. The rideshare car slid through Atlanta's early afternoon traffic, weaving among downtown's skyscrapers. Gabrielle's anxiety heightened as they pulled up to SecureCom's imposing headquarters, a sleek glass-paneled building with the company's logo displayed in bold letters above the entrance. She tipped the driver and quickly stepped out, adjusting her blazer and smoothing her skirt. Inside the lobby was a testament to modern corporate glamour, gleaming marble floors, an understated water feature, and minimalist furniture. She approached the reception desk, manned by a genial older woman who verified Gabrielle's credentials. Within minutes, a young assistant escorted her to the 30th floor, where broad windows revealed a panoramic view of Atlanta's skyline. In the conference room, 3 people waited Hannah Lee Secure Comms, head of IT acquisitions, Donovan King, the CFO, and surprisingly, the CEO himself, Martin Pollard. He was a tall, authoritative figure who exuded quiet confidence. Gabrielle's breath caught at the sight of Pollard. Elizabeth was right. The CEO's presence signaled a high-stakes encounter. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming." Pollard set his handshake firm. "It's my pleasure," Gabrielle replied, summoning a professional smile. She set up her presentation quickly, connecting her laptop to the large screen. The meeting started with introductions, polite small talk, and a review of Secure Comms' expansion goals. Hannah Lee explained that they were looking for advanced consulting services to integrate cutting-edge cybersecurity measures into their new cloud architecture. Gabrielle took a steadying breath. "We at GlobeLink Solutions specialize in synergy-driven approaches." She began, her voice clear but warm. She navigated through slides detailing GlobeLink's track record, previous successful projects, the diversity of their client base, and the innovative solutions that had vaulted them into the tech limelight. Every so often, she caught glimpses of Martin Pollard's reaction. His eyes never left the screen, and he rarely blinked. Donovan King chimed in, with detailed questions about budgeting timeline and ROI. Gabrielle answered each inquiry methodically, showcasing her thorough preparedness. Hannah Lee's questions were more technical. How do we scale to an international market with different privacy regulations? Gabrielle highlighted GlobeLink's proven expertise in global compliance. Halfway through, Martin Pollard leaned forward. "Ms. Thompson, I've heard about your leadership style from some of our mutual contacts. You focus heavily on fostering inclusive teams." Correct, Gabrielle nodded. "Yes, we've found that diverse, inclusive teams are the most innovative. It's not just a moral stance, it's good business." She caught the flicker of approval in Pollard's eyes. When she concluded, the room sat in a comfortable hush. Pollard finally spoke. "Impressive. We've been watching GlobeLink's progress for a while. We believe synergy is everything right now in the cybersecurity sector. We have other potential partners, but you're different." Her heart drummed a swift rhythm. Different could mean many things, small, minority-led, or agile in the face of bigger competitors. She prepared to defend her company's position, but Pollard surprised her. "We want a deeper relationship than just a vendor contract," he said. "I'd like to explore a strategic partnership or possibly partial acquisition." The magnitude of his words felt like a spotlight shining directly onto Gabrielle. She could practically hear her career pivoting in real time. She thanked them for the opportunity and promised to relay the details to her higher-ups immediately. As the meeting wrapped, she felt a surge of triumph. She was so focused on savoring this victory, she nearly forgot the sour memory of the TSA encounter. Almost. In another corner of Atlanta, ironically just a few miles away from Secure Comms headquarters, Eddie Burns was stepping out of a rental car. He had come to the city for a mandatory TSA training workshop, an irony that wouldn't become apparent until much later. Arriving at the local TSA branch office near the airport, he felt an undercurrent of unease. This was the first time he'd been required to attend additional training outside of his home base. He told himself it was routine. Budget cuts and staff reassignments was the official line. Yet a nagging doubt tugged at him. Could it be because of the subtle complaints filed against him? He brushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the fact that after the workshop, he'd have a few days off. Maybe he'd tour Atlanta, visit the Georgia Aquarium, or catch a game at Truist Park if the Braves were in town. But once inside the TSA facility, Eddie was ushered into a cramped conference room with about a dozen other officers. Posters on the walls spelled out guidelines about unbiased searches, non-discrimination policies, and effective communication with passengers. The irony felt palpable. Eddie sank into a folding chair, scanning the faces of the instructors. They began discussing the importance of neutral body language, awareness of microaggressions, and how to handle passenger complaints. The words stung uncomfortably. Eddie's mind involuntarily flashed to Gabrielle, her calm, unwavering stare, and that moment he flagged her bin for no concrete reason other than a feeling. Around lunchtime, the group took a break. Eddie lingered by the coffee machine, overhearing two colleagues discuss how a fellow officer had been dismissed for repeated profiling complaints. Dismissed. The word resonated like a cannon shot. Eddie's blood chilled. He'd worked hard to build a stable government. Job. If he were let go, what then? He didn't have a college degree, and his skill set was fairly specialized. The thought made him clench his coffee cup a bit too tight. After the session, the instructor pulled Eddie aside. "Eddie, we appreciate your service. Just remember, the TSA is under a lot of scrutiny for potential racial profiling. We can't stress enough how each passenger should be treated equally." "Understood." Eddie nodded, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. He felt singled out, much as he had singled out Gabrielle. The swirl of hypocrisy made him uneasy. Meanwhile, Gabrielle was in a jubilant meeting with her boss, Elizabeth Crane, who had flown in from New York to discuss Secure Com's strategic offer. They toasted with iced coffees in a chic cafe, excitement radiating off them as they brainstormed next steps. Gabrielle felt an intoxicating blend of relief and joy. The day had gone far better than she'd hoped. Outside, the Atlanta sun began to set, painting the skyscrapers gold and pink. Two people in the same city, their worlds on a collision course, each grappling with the consequences of one seemingly insignificant moment in an airport security line. Fate had more surprises in store. The next morning found Gabrielle back in a conference room, this time at GlobeLink Solutions' local Atlanta branch. Elizabeth Crane had called an emergency meeting with their senior team, patching in remote executives through a video call. The energy in the room crackled with excitement as Gabrielle recounted her conversation with SecureCom. On screen, the CEO of GlobeLink, Raymond Marshall, leaned forward. "Did I hear that correctly?" "Gabrielle?" "They're interested in a strategic partnership or partial acquisition." His tone held equal parts awe and caution. Gabrielle nodded. "Yes, that's the gist. Martin Pollard wants a deeper collaboration. It goes beyond standard consulting. We could be integrated into their ecosystem, or they might acquire a stake in GlobeLink." She placed a series of printed documents on the table. Summaries of Secure Com's proposals, projected revenue models, and possible synergy frameworks. Elizabeth Crane always composed, let a rare grin slip. "This is a huge leap for us. But we must tread carefully. A partial acquisition could compromise our autonomy." The conversation unfolded over the next hour, dissecting the ramifications for finances, brand identity, and corporate culture. Even in the swirl of strategy, Gabrielle felt a persistent undercurrent of validation. A year ago, some of these very executives had barely taken her calls. Now she was the linchpin for a deal that could skyrocket GlobeLink Solutions into a new stratosphere. Raymond said, "I'll have our legal team draft possible scenarios. Gabrielle, your next step is to maintain that good rapport with Martin Pollard. Let him know we're interested, but we need details." Everyone in the room understood the gravity of this moment. GlobeLink had fought hard for recognition in a crowded market. Now they had a chance to become a powerhouse. The meeting wrapped with enthusiastic handshakes and new tasks assigned. As Gabrielle packed up her laptop, Elizabeth pulled her aside. "This is your chance to shine. The entire executive team sees it, and I want you to know you've earned every bit of this." Gabrielle smiled, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She was proud but also mindful of what this meant for her personally. She was no longer just a rising star. She was on the cusp of becoming a key figure in GlobeLink's future. After the meeting, Gabrielle returned to her hotel room to freshen up. She checked her phone and noticed a text from a friend who worked at the HR department in GlobeLink's Chicago office. "You won't believe the new job postings we have up. Some big expansion must be coming. Senior positions, too. We're looking for a security liaison. Ironically enough." LOL. Interested. Gabrielle laughed at the coincidence. Security liaison, the same field as the TSA officer who gave her trouble. She typed a quick reply. "No thanks, but keep me posted on the details." She had no inkling that this job posting one, ironically connected to airport security, would soon have a direct link to Eddie Burns. Sometimes fate's sense of irony is sharper than any of us anticipate. The universe sometimes orchestrates events with poetic precision, as if to prove a point about karma. Late that same afternoon, Eddie Burns was sitting in the cramped lounge area of the TSA office near Hartsfield-Jackson, flipping through job listings on his phone. He wasn't actively job hunting, but the conversation he'd overheard about a colleague's dismissal weighed on him. He felt a creeping insecurity about his own future. What if the next complaint targeted him? The glow of the phone reflected in his tense eyes as he scrolled through various listings on a popular job site. Positions for security consultants, data analysts, airport screeners in other cities. Nothing particularly enticing. Then he saw a new posting, Security Liaison GlobeLink Solutions. The name rang a faint bell. He tapped on it. The job description was intriguing. Seeking an experienced professional with knowledge of security protocols, risk assessment and compliance. Must have strong people skills and an ability to coordinate between corporate entities and external agencies. The salary range was surprisingly high with comprehensive benefits. Eddie's eyebrows shot up. For a moment he fantasized about leaving the TSA behind. No more frantic lines. No more mind-numbing scanning. He could wear suits, attend meetings, maybe earn some respect. He sighed. Who am I kidding? He didn't have a college degree, and while he had years of experience, his skill set was niche. Corporate America was a far cry from government security lines. Still, he bookmarked the listing, feeling a strange pull. Across town, in the HR wing of GlobeLink's Atlanta branch, instructions had come directly from Elizabeth Crane's office to ramp up recruitment for new security-focused positions. The swirling rumors of a secure comm partnership meant GlobeLink would soon have to manage more sensitive data. They needed a robust security staff, professionals who understood compliance threats and the intricacies of government regulations. So the job posting went live that afternoon. Meanwhile, Gabrielle was finishing a celebratory dinner with Elizabeth Crane at a trendy Atlanta bistro. Over a decadent dessert, they discussed the intricacies of the potential partnership, brainstorming everything from co-branded marketing campaigns to new tech innovations. Gabrielle made a passing joke about how even their security would need an upgrade. "Maybe we'll hire someone from TSA," she quipped, half in jest, half out of personal irony. Elizabeth chuckled. not realizing just how prophetic Gabrielle's words might be. When dinner wrapped up, Gabrielle felt an unshakable sense of forward momentum. Tomorrow she would fly back to Chicago to strategize further with the rest of GlobeLink's leadership team. Maybe she'd even run into that TSA officer again. But if she did, it'd only be a fleeting annoyance. Or so she thought. Eddie, now back in his hotel room, stared at the job listing for another full minute before locking his phone. "Nah," he muttered. But doubt lingered. He flicked off the bedside lamp, the job ad's details etched in his mind. Unbeknownst to him, his life was about to collide with Gabrielle's again, and in a way that would turn his world completely upside down. The next day, Gabrielle arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson well before her flight to Chicago. She wanted to avoid any potential security delays and maybe pick up a souvenir for her niece. She felt buoyant, the success of the Secure Com meeting still fresh in her mind. Walking past the large signage directing passengers to the TSA lines, she paused there a few checkpoints over. She caught a glimpse of a familiar face. It can't be, she thought, heart skipping a beat. Yes, it was Eddie Burns, stationed once again at the security area. A swirl of emotions overtook her: frustration, indignation, but also a curious sense of pity. She thought about the partnership with SecureCom, about her rising status at GlobeLink, and how small that humiliating encounter now seemed in the grand scheme of her success. He's just a guy doing a job he doesn't even seem to love. Still, the sting of that moment lingered. She joined the line, half hoping she'd bypass Eddie's lane. But fate wasn't so kind. The serpentine queue delivered her right to his station. Eddie's eyes flicked up as she approached, and a visible tension seized his posture. He recognized her immediately. Oh no. His first instinct was to look away. But it was too late. Gabrielle set her belongings in the bin, silently praying for a routine pass. She stepped through the metal detector without a beep, exuding calm, despite her racing heart. Eddie glanced at her name on the boarding pass, then at her ID. The memory of rummaging through her toiletry bag flashed through his mind. He swallowed hard. "Ma'am," he said, mustering a polite tone. "Could you step over here, please?" Irritation flared in Gabrielle's chest. She'd done everything right again. Yet here he was, singling her out. She decided not to hold back this time. "Is there a problem?" "Officer?" she asked, locking eyes with him. Eddie hesitated. If he insisted on searching her again without cause, it would only confirm his bias. The last thing he needed was a formal complaint. "Ah, no, you're free to proceed," he finally managed, voice subdued. Their eyes lingered on each other for a moment, an unspoken tension passing between them. Gabrielle scooped up her belongings, feeling a mixture of relief and residual anger. Eddie's cheeks burned with shame or regret, he wasn't sure which. As she walked away, Gabrielle recalled the last time someone had made her feel so belittled. She nearly turned around to confront him, to say something that would release the frustration pent up in her chest. But she let it go. He clearly wasn't worth the fight. Instead, she left the security area with her head held high, telling herself she would never have to deal with him again. Little did either of them know an unexpected twist was already in motion. Their paths were about to converge once more in an arena far removed from TSA lines, an arena where Gabrielle held the upper hand, and Eddie would learn the hardest lesson of his life. Eddie trudged through the remainder of his shift, feeling like a man on a tightrope. Each passenger he screened became a test. Would he exercise unwarranted suspicion, or let them pass unimpeded. His supervisor, Monique Silva, had her eyes on him. He could feel the weight of her oversight every time she hovered near his station. And now, seeing Gabrielle again, had ripped open the guilt he'd tried to bury. After clocking out, he retreated to the break room, hoping for solitude. Manny found him anyway. "Hey, heard you had a run-in with that woman again," Manny said, handing Eddie a bottled water. "Yeah," Eddie replied, voice hollow. "I'm trying to stay professional." "But she recognized me." Manny raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't blame her for filing a complaint, you know." Eddie exhaled, pressing the cool plastic bottle to his forehead. "I hope she doesn't. I can't lose this job." The day dragged on in a haze. By evening, Eddie was back in his hotel room, flicking through TV channels without absorbing anything. His phone dinged. A text from a coworker. "Check your email. Supervisor meeting tomorrow." Something big. Eddie's stomach clenched. Was this it? His final reckoning? Sleep was impossible. Around midnight, desperation crept in. He grabbed his phone and revisited the security liaison Globe Link Solutions listing. What if I just applied? The thought was absurd, but he felt cornered. With trembling fingers, he tapped the apply button. He didn't have a polished resume, so he typed a quick summary of his TSA experience, highlighted his knowledge of security procedures, and pressed submit. The next morning, while Eddie sat in a grim meeting at the TSA office Indeed about potential staffing changes, Gabrielle was in GlobeLink's Chicago office for a briefing. Toward the end, the HR director, a cheery woman named Tessa, mentioned they'd received an application for the security liaison role from someone at the TSA. The name rung a faint bell for Gabrielle. She asked Tessa to forward the details. When Gabrielle opened the attached resume, her eyes widened. "Eddie Burns. That's him," she whispered to herself, reading through his meager qualifications. A swirl of emotions flooded her: anger at his audacity, amusement at the irony, and a flicker of pity. Tessa asked, "Should we consider him?" Gabrielle inhaled slowly. Logically, she should separate personal feelings from professional decisions, but it felt impossible. This was the man who had treated her like a criminal for no reason. Did he deserve a fair shot or a taste of his own medicine? After a tense moment, she cleared her throat. "Let's do a preliminary screening. Set up an interview if he meets the basic criteria." Gabrielle wanted to see if Eddie could navigate a world where she had the power to scrutinize him. A small, vengeful part of her welcomed the chance to confront him in a setting where the tables were turned. What neither of them realized was that this interview would become a defining moment, a collision of prejudice, ambition, regret, and ultimately the harsh reality of karma. A week passed, and tensions mounted. Gabrielle decided to lead the interview panel herself for the security liaison role. Typically, such interviews were conducted by an HR team and a mid-level manager, but given the potential partnership with SecureCom, she had every right to be involved. Plus, she couldn't deny that part of her needed closure, or perhaps retribution. Eddie arrived at GlobeLink's Chicago office in a borrowed suit that was a size too large. Anxiety radiated off him as he stepped into the sleek lobby. He approached the receptionist, who directed him to a waiting area beside a row of frosted glass conference rooms. The environment felt alien. No loudspeakers, no security lines, no menial checks. Just the sterile hush of corporate calm. He tried to recall interview tips from YouTube videos, maintain eye contact, speak clearly, exude confidence. But his heart pounded at the memory of who might be on the other side of that door. "She works for GlobeLink, doesn't she?" The woman from the airport. He hoped-prayed it wouldn't be her. Soon a young HR associate came out to greet him. "Mr. Burns." "We're ready for you now." Eddie gathered his nerves and followed her into a glass-enclosed conference room. Seated at a long table were two individuals, the HR director, Tessa, and Gabrielle Thompson. Gabrielle's expression was neutral, but Eddie instantly recognized her. His stomach dropped. No way out now. "Good afternoon, Mr. Burns." Gabrielle began, her tone professional but chilly. "I'm Gabrielle Thompson, Regional Director here at GlobeLink Solutions. This is Tessa from HR. Thank you for coming in." Eddie forced a polite nod. "Thank you for having me," he stammered, throat dry. The interview began with routine questions about his background experience with the TSA and knowledge of security compliance. Eddie tried to steady his voice, leaning on the limited experience he had with government regulations. Tessa scribbled notes, occasionally nodding at his responses. Gabrielle, however, drilled down deeper. "In your TSA role, how did you handle potential bias or profiling concerns?" Eddie swallowed. "I always tried to follow TSA protocol. We're trained to focus on objective criteria, not personal biases." A flicker of something, was it amusement, crossed Gabrielle's face. "And how do you address a passenger who feels they've been singled out unfairly?" He cleared his throat. I would explain the situation, ensure them it's standard procedure, not personal." The tension in the room was tangible. Tessa seemed unaware of the subtext, but for Eddie and Gabrielle it was palpable. Gabrielle shifted gears, asking him scenario-based questions about working with corporate teams, bridging communication between internal security and external agencies. Eddie gave polite, if somewhat vague, answers. At last, Tessa signaled the wrap-up. "We'll let you know our decision in a week or so," she said. Gabrielle closed the file in front of her. "Thank you for your time." Her tone was courteous, but her eyes lingered on Eddie for a beat longer than necessary. She offered no handshake, just a tight nod. Eddie left the conference room, feeling like he'd narrowly escaped a firing squad. Little did he know Gabrielle still had a final say, and her decision wouldn't be in his favor. Once Eddie was gone, Tessa turned to Gabrielle. "He seems nervous, but maybe he has some potential. The TSA background could be valuable with secure comms requirements." "What do you think?" Gabrielle inhaled, recalling the humiliating scrutiny she'd endured from Eddie more than once. She weighed her professional integrity against the personal slight. "He's underqualified for this role," she said firmly. "His answers about compliance and bias were superficial, and bridging corporate and government agencies requires excellent communication skills." She paused. "I didn't see that in him." Tessa jotted down a note. "Fair enough. We have other candidates anyway." With that, Eddie's fate at GlobeLink was sealed. He would receive the typical rejection email in a few days, thanking him for his interest, but stating they'd gone with a more qualified candidate. Gabrielle felt a surge of complicated emotions, relief, vindication, and a lingering bitterness. Maybe it's best this way, she thought. He's not a good fit. Later that afternoon, Gabrielle attended a leadership meeting where Secure Comms partnership was declared almost certain. The board toasted with sparkling water, confident that final negotiations were just a formality. Gabrielle's star was rising faster than ever. She tried to let her personal grudge fade into the background, focusing on the bigger picture: her career, GlobeLink's future, and the opportunities to come. Eddie's life, however, began to unravel. The day after his interview, he checked his email incessantly, hearing nothing. Then a phone call came from his TSA supervisor. "Eddie, due to some reorganization and the upcoming audit, we're letting some staff go. Your name is on the list." The words felt like a punch to the gut. His job, his identity vanished with a sterile HR explanation about budget cuts and organizational changes. In truth, repeated complaints about profiling had caught up with him. Within 24 hours, Eddie faced 2 crushing rejections, losing the TSA position and receiving the official thanks. But no thanks email from GlobeLink Solutions. He stared at his phone, rereading the lines. While we appreciate your interest, we regret to inform you we have decided to pursue other candidates. The final blow came when he noticed the signature Tessa Johnson, HR Director, CC Gabrielle Thompson. In a small, dingy apartment he'd rented near the airport, Eddie sank onto the couch, numb. He flicked through cable channels, jobless prospects, slim. The arrogance and biases he'd carried were now replaced by regret and panic. The woman he'd called suspicious had unwittingly become the arbiter of his future. He didn't need a fortune teller to see this was karma, plain and simple. Word travels in strange ways, and soon Manny heard about Eddie's dismissal and texted him condolences. Eddie replied with a single sentence. She had the final say, didn't she? Manny didn't respond, but he knew exactly who she was. In the silence of that lonely room, Eddie finally understood how a moment of unjust suspicion could spiral into a cataclysmic downfall, leaving him with a lesson he'd never forget. Days turned into weeks. Eddie packed up what little he had in Atlanta and returned to Cincinnati, crashing on his brother's couch while searching for new opportunities. He had learned a hard lesson about how fleeting security could be when built on a shaky foundation of bias and complacency. He half-heartedly applied to security guard positions, even considered going back to school. The future looked uncertain, shadowed by regret. Meanwhile, Gabrielle soared higher within GlobeLink Solutions. The partial acquisition deal with SecureCom was finalized. Overnight, GlobeLink's valuation jumped, and news outlets touted the partnership as a bold move in cybersecurity innovation. Gabrielle received a promotion, stepping into a newly created vice president role. In the celebratory dinner that followed, she reflected on her journey, how a single encounter in an airport line had become an unlikely footnote in her own saga of perseverance. Eventually, Gabrielle confided in Elizabeth Crane about the TSA ordeal. Elizabeth was stunned, shaking her head at the cosmic irony that had placed Gabrielle in the power seat for Eddie's job application. "You did the right thing," Elizabeth reassured her. "We need someone truly qualified, and if he had a history of profiling, that's the last thing we need here." Months after the dust settled, Gabrielle found herself passing through O'Hare again this time, heading to a conference in Silicon Valley. She noticed a new TSA officer who greeted her with a friendly smile, checked her ID, and waved her through without issue. She felt a warmth at this simple courtesy, a reminder that not every TSA officer was like Eddie. Prejudice was a personal failing, not an institutional inevitability. As for Eddie, he eventually landed an unremarkable security job at a local mall scanning for shoplifters. On some late nights, he found himself replaying his encounters with Gabrielle, wishing he could apologize or at least erase that suspicious glare he'd leveled at her. But life moved on for both of them. The airline drama that had begun with a racist spark ended in a lesson about power dynamics and personal responsibility. Karma, it seemed, had dealt its card swiftly and with finality. And in the space of those few days, Gabrielle Thompson solidified her place as a formidable force in the tech world, untouchable, unstoppable, and unwavering in her commitment to fairness, even when the scales could have easily tipped to a more vengeful side. For every traveler who steps off a plane and into a fateful encounter, there's a story lurking in the airport hallways. This one ended the next morning with a job posting on a board that changed a life for better or for worse, and it stands as a testament to the power of a single moment, a single choice to ripple outward with consequences beyond what anyone might have imagined. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster tale of airport showdowns, unexpected twists, and karmic justice. If you found yourself hooked by the drama and uplifted by Gabrielle's triumph, please do us a favor. Like this video to support our storytelling, share it with friends who appreciate a riveting narrative, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that captivate your imagination. By hitting that subscribe button, you won't miss our next tale of everyday heroes, shocking coincidences, and powerful moments that challenge how we see the world. Your support means everything. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us continue bringing you tales of victory against the odds and reminders that even the smallest action can unleash ripples of consequence in our lives. Join our community today, and together let's keep exploring these incredible stories that might just be happening in the seat next to you.